Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 221, and I had a conversation with Amir Abdullah, and he is a Muslim American. He is an actor. He is a playwright and a screenwriter. He has played Macbeth. He's been in Romeo and Juliet. He's narrated the young adult novel Tristan Strong Punches a Hole in the Sky. He's been on Empire and Chicago Med. Very bright man, super interesting. And I met him in a writer's group and thought, man, this guy's got some cool thoughts in the old brain pan, and I wonder if he'd be on the show. And we talk about everything from Shakespeare to plays that he's been in, obviously, to what it's like to be an actor, to what it's like to be a Muslim American. We talked about his childhood and the history of that. We talked about what it was like to be very aware of being Muslim when 9/11 happened, and all the stuff that went on around that for him. It's lots of really great conversation. I was delighted that he agreed to be on the show. In other news, social media, Hey Human Podcast is on Facebook and Instagram. My personal social media, Susan Ruthism, is Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. You can reach me, Susan, at heyhumanpodcast.com. Speaking of heyhumanpodcast.com, there is a links page on there, and I curate every week's episode with a whole bunch of information, books, and movie things, and article things, and all sorts of things that have to do with what my guest and I talk about. So this week, of course, is no different, and definitely go check out that links page and see what I put up there. And Amir recommended a couple books as well, so I made sure that those were on the links page too. And I included some Shakespeare stuff because I love Shakespeare, and it's always fun to share all that kind of thing. If you are interested in music, check out my music on iTunes, Susan Ruth. 4 records are on there. Should be not too hard to find, and I'd love to know what you think. Send me an email. Tell me what you think. SusanRuth.com for all my other sorts of things that don't have to do with the podcast. And you can also sign up for the mailing list there at SusanRuth.com. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts, and I very much appreciate that as well. It's extraordinarily helpful and gets the metrics doing what we want them to do on the old iTunes and the Podbeans and the Spotifys and things. A reminder, I am on the serial podcast Sentinels, The Point of No Return, written and directed by Mike Disa. That is my jumping into voiceover work and acting on podcasts. It was very exciting. Check that out if you're into sci-fi stories. And I think that's it. Let's just get into this and Amir and his story. Thank you for listening, everyone. I appreciate it. Please stay safe, and thinking about you wherever you are. And a special shout out to somebody very, very important to me. You know who you are. Get well soon. All right, everyone. Love you. Here we go. Amir Abdullah, welcome to Hey Human.
Hi there. Thank you for having me, Susan.
See, look, it's already started, so you don't have to worry. Are you nervous, really?
Yeah, I am nervous. I am nervous because a lot of times I feel like I can't necessarily speak freely, especially in this time. Like, it's a very volatile time where your words and the way that you express yourself is like you have to choose your words very carefully. It's a good thing. But at the same time, it can be hard to learn new things if you're afraid to speak. So
yeah, the good news is, bad news is I just forgot to hit a button, but it still works. The good news is that this is a very free space, a very vulnerable and open and loving and accepting space. So whatever you have to say, if you need to swear, if you need to get mad, if you know anything, if you cry, I've cried on this show countless times.
I heard. No,
it's true. It's true. I have. So, I welcome you to, obviously you're going to feel what you feel, but I just, so you know, this is safety. So, yeah. And if somebody
I don't think it's you I'm scared of.
I was just going to say, if somebody has an issue with something that you and I are talking about, then they can come to me and I'll deal with it. So it's all good. Trust me.
I appreciate that. I like that Susan armor. I got it.
Yeah.
I got it.
I've had all sorts of interesting folks on this show. People that I know. Yeah.
The last couple of shows, I mean, I was like, I don't know if I'm as interesting as someone that works as a dominatrix, and a psychologist. Like at the same time, I was like, I'm really honored to be here, like, to approach the same mic.
I'm really glad you're here too. And you know what? I know how to spot interesting people, so it's all good. I'm excited too. All right, tell me about, firstly, you're in Los Angeles.
Yes, in Los Angeles. I've been here a little under 10 years, which is wild to say. Like, it's a city that can feel like you just got here, and then in a blink of an eye, you've been here for a while. So that's definitely my case.
When your parents, remember when we were little and our parents, I don't know if your parents did this, said like, oh, wait till you're older, time's gonna fly by.
I know, and then the pandemic came. This is forever.
That is true. That is true. The months of this year, I keep saying that we shouldn't even have to count this year because, at least on birthdays, I don't think this birthday year counts. Just roll the clock back. You're a year younger. I deem it so.
Oh, you late. I've been doing that since 2010, Susan.
Yeah. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, which is interesting because it's one of the places that's been in the news lately for taking down one of the Confederate statues. There's a statue in a place called Hemmings Park, which was named after a Confederate general. And they've taken down one of the statues. Also, a lot of the high schools around the area were named after Confederate generals. We had Jeb Stuart, Robert E. Lee, Nathaniel B. Forrester. Like, these were the names of some of the schools that were in my area. I used to grow up seeing a Confederate flag literally every single day. And in some strange ways, it becomes normal. Like it was a normal state of existence for me to be constantly around and just accept like symbols of white supremacy. That was a part of it. I mean, even as a kid, I was born in Atlanta. We'd gone up to Stone Mountain, Georgia for one of the 4th of July celebrations. Stone Mountain, Georgia has like 4 Confederate generals etched into the mountain. And here we are, a black family that's just there. Yay! American freedom. It's a very interesting place that we live in. I mean, it's informed a few things, and I can definitely see, I definitely have a unique perspective growing up constantly around that.
Did it create conversation in the family? Because especially when you're little, you don't know, right? And then you hit a certain age, self-awareness kicks in, and other people's opinions kick in, and then you get history lessons, which are already whitewashed anyway from our generation. So then how do you come home from school and be like, Mom, Dad, what's up with that?
Well, I was very fortunate in some ways. Number one, to have both parents present and a grandmother. But both of my parents came from very different backgrounds. As far as my mother grew up in the North DC area. She and my grandmother were basically, their family were of a black business class. They were able to. My grandmother's side of the family owned a very famous flower shop called Chisley's Flowers, which was in the Washington, D.C. area. And it was the place that a lot of obviously it's a very segregated time, where if you were somebody who was somebody in the black community, that's where you went and got your flowers. And it was a very successful business. There are pictures of my great uncle with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and other dignitaries, within the African American community. So my mother and grandmother grew up around a lot of volatility, but also a fair amount of success during that time, relatively speaking, especially considering what was going on down south, which is where my father grew up in Miami, Florida, in the projects. I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with the movie Moonlight, but the Pork and Beans Project is where the other half of my family is from. Also, obviously, very segregated. It was America and still is America. Some people will absolutely argue during that time. But my father was a part of one of the first graduating classes at University of Miami that was desegregated. And especially with inner city kids, which makes a big difference. So there was a protest the week before. There was a protest at the University of Miami that was ongoing. Some of the black students were complaining because there was hardly any black representation, which is sad because I feel as if a lot of universities are still having that same conversation and same argument. But this was going on around 1968. And so 1968. So they came and offered scholarships at several of the inner city schools in Miami, in the city of Miami, which was almost unheard of. Miami was known as like Suntan U. It was wealth in Coral Gables, a wealthy white area, which was adjacent to the historically black area, Coconut Grove, Florida. But it was basically an oasis. And they had come to his school and offered scholarships to some of the kids. My dad went to Miami Northwestern, which is a fairly famous school, at least for their football program in Northwest Miami. And these were the stories that I grew up with. My parents did a wonderful job with teaching us our history. We went several times to the plantation. There's a plantation in the Jacksonville area called Kingsley Plantation. And it's relatively still intact with the big house, the slave quarters. All of these things were very much etched in my mind. Even the statue of Andrew Jackson downtown, James Weldon Johnson, the writer of the Black National Anthem, is from Jacksonville, Florida. There's a lot of rich history and rich Black history in those areas. Bethune-Cookman College wasn't too far from me, which was after Mary McLeod Bethune. There are several historically Black colleges and universities in the area, and Waters College. Like, there's a rich Black history that my parents did a wonderful job with, enriching us with, and making sure we knew where we came from, and especially since we weren't going to get some of that education in school. So I remember I definitely gave some of my teachers a difficult time in high school, especially my history teachers. We'd have to, European history was a requirement for us to take, but we only covered certain parts of European history, which is a disservice to a lot of us. So our history doesn't matter. We can't take African history. We can't take everything else gets encompassed in world history, but we have to take a European history class as a requirement. Not that I feel like there's nothing to be gained from learning European history. I'm just saying it is a tool that shows us what is important to people.
I think it's problematic to only show one part of history. I mean, we talk about that a lot on this podcast, that does a disservice to all of us.
Yes.
And it's just wrong. Aside from the fact that it's just wrong, it's got a lot of layers. A, wrong. B, you rob people of a beautiful understanding of the world at large, which is a shame. on so many levels, and I have no idea. I mean, I know why. I understand why it's that way, but I don't understand on a deeper human level why anyone would want to rob themselves of that. It's just so mind-boggling for me, but then I come from a totally different perspective.
Because knowledge is dangerous.
Yeah.
That's why.
Yeah.
Because knowing is dangerous to a lot of people. Because if as the saying goes, if you knew better, you do better.
Also, don't make me think. Don't make me think. If I think, then I have to look at how I'm culpable and how I play a part in this whole system, and that makes people wildly uncomfortable.
Right, and it absolutely destroys the mythos and the way that the country is built up. The United States is built up into exceptionalism, and having to hold a mirror up and take a look, you might not like some of the things that we'd find. You won't like some of the things that you'd find because it can go against a lot of the things that we are taught, and even the histories that are passed down from the people before us. That's a hard pill to swallow for a lot of people, and there's little to no incentive to do it. And that's why I think coming from the South, you do have a decent I think I do have a unique perspective of being able to understand where some of the racism comes from, the fear that's involved in it, and the difficulty in losing what you deem a part of yourself, and the needing to feel validated and feel like you matter, for lack of a better word. And that's something that some poor white people would feel as if it's slipping away from them.
Yeah, I understand that on an intellectual level, but just pouring a little empathy or compassion or just not knowledge, like you said, I had a conversation with somebody the other day. I've been being a Facebook warrior these days because it's unbelievable. Anyway, and somebody had posted something that was absolutely false. It was a flat out lie. And I reached out to them privately and I said, this isn't true. This is why it's not true. This is why it's problematic. And they responded, oh yeah, okay, yeah, I guess that's not true. But they didn't take it down. Which I don't get that either. It's one thing to learn and grow, give yourself room to do those things, but then take action.
Yeah. But again, Susan, what's the incentive? What's the incentive for that person to take some action?
I don't know. I don't have an answer.
Right.
I don't have an answer.
And that's the hard thing with trying to solve some of these existential problems. And I think I did just mention that it was poor white people. It's not. This exists at every single level, from the poor to the rich. And especially with everything that's going on now, you see what I deem performative acts of wokeness from companies that have not stood historically for equal rights, not just for Black people, but just for the people that work there for said companies. So this is a very unique and interesting time to be in. And also, Susan, this is why a lot of times I feel like it's difficult for me to say anything, because on one end, you can argue that, okay, large multinational companies says Black Lives Matter. That's better than what they were doing in 2015 when I was, when I started being out in the streets to protest and say Black Lives Matter. But it's another thing if this same multinational company has just fired someone who was Black that was advocating for their same right, for their rights to be protected from the coronavirus, or from getting equal pay or a living wage, or in my opinion, all of these things are connected, but that's not a conversation that a lot of people are having or are willing to have.
Well, and I think too, the one color that is the true superior color to most is green. Money.
Yes.
It's money.
Yes.
It comes down to money.
Yeah. Well, euros and stuff aren't necessarily, they got metal euros. They're purple and stuff. So, no, I'm teasing.
Yeah, I know. I'm othering money now. Terrible. And I think about that too. It's funny because I had this conversation with someone the other day, just offhandedly, and I was voicing frustrations, and they said, "Well, isn't that othering too? Aren't you doing exactly what?" I'm like, where does the line get drawn? Do I get to not other people that are living in a brain place that pushes down others to make themselves feel good? I think that's, and so I get trapped, like you said, an existential problem, a philosophical problem. But
right. You can. It's so easy to. It is so easy to get caught in like a feedback loop of, I don't want to say wokeness, but like it's a feedback loop of, okay, well, I can't do, so what do I, okay, then a lot of times I encourage myself and others just to take a breath and do what we can change right there, right here, what's right there in front of us. That's the main thing we can do. We can make those changes, and yes, we can make some changes, like trying to cut out said multinational company if that's what you're capable of. But you can do it in other ways. And I want to be careful in my own personal life with shaming people for not living the way that I personally want.
Right, of course. And that's the conundrum. That's the thing. I mean, my whole life is a particular mindset, and if other people aren't there yet, because of what I believe and who I am, I have to leave room for that compassion, which is annoying as fuck. Like, I don't want to be.
No, you gotta have that. You have to have empathy, though, because that's the thing that's part of the thing that got you to where you are today. Where you are today.
Yeah, I know, but you get
your own.
It's like the joke's on
someone
me.
Having empathy on you.
Yeah, the joke's on me. The joke's on me, and it's funny too. The idea of woke. Sometimes that word to me sometimes is so annoying. It's like, you know what? Firstly, I feel like woke came about because people want to make it about themselves. Look at me protesting. Look at me doing this. Look at me.
Right.
And so they're like, I'm woke. It's like there's that line about charity in the Bible about let not the left hand know what the right hand is doing. In other words, like it sort of ruins the point if you have to make it about yourself. Right. I don't know. But then there's that conundrum of you want to be vocal about it because you hope that it perhaps inspires or lights a fire under someone else. We are in a constant state of, as you say perfectly, of that it's existential. Yeah. And
I do not have the answers.
No!
I do not have the answers to it. Other than it's good that these conversations. It's good that the conversations are happening.
And uncomfortable ones, especially.
It's good that they're topics you're comfortable with, but there are things I'm not comfortable with talking about because I don't have enough knowledge on some of these subjects. Right. So
I get that too.
You want to be woke, but you want to but you also got to learn. Yeah. You got to learn your wokeness.
Sure. So, listening is a big part of it as well. And then, there's always I think the most beautiful thing about existing is that we don't know shit. And every day, we're trying to learn something more. And that there's so much out there to know between each other, between the world at large. And that's exciting. And
it is exciting.
Yeah.
And it's also, I think for me, it's also a little depressing because I feel like I'm so lucky to be able to know that, to be able to sit down and like have a conversation with somebody who's completely like outside of myself or out of where I came from. But I think the most important thing for a lot of people to remember is that this isn't happening every single other place. This isn't everywhere. That's the hardest thing about living, especially in larger cities. I've lived in quite a few, and there can be a difference. There can be a difference because you are forced to be around other people. The incentive is, okay, if I want to continue to function in society, I have to be around other people. There's no way, there's a less of a chance of avoiding it. Whereas in other communities or other people even, they can avoid that. I mean, we talk about rural versus urban, but you looking at the city of Los Angeles, people on the west side, some people on the west side only want to stay on the west side. They don't want to come to they don't want to come to any other places. A lot of people get to live in a bubble. And it doesn't matter where you are. You could be in a rural place or in an urban city. You can still do that if that's what you want to do. And if you have no incentive to move outside of your bubble. And so that's why I think we're at a difficult time in history. And we have to find things that connect us all together.
When you look at yourself in the mirror in the morning, do you look at yourself and say, "Hi, Amir," or do you look at yourself and say, "Hi, black guy"? I have to now go out into the world and people, most people it's not going to occur to them. What does that enter your consciousness? When I look in the mirror in the morning, sometimes I go, "Oh my God." But other than that, I don't go, "Oh, I'm a white person." Do you know what I mean? There's this voice, this constant voice that is screaming out saying, you need to do this, or you need to toe the line, or you can't talk back. It's, where is that in identity?
I don't think it's when I look in the mirror. Maybe after I've gotten dressed. Maybe after I've gotten dressed and looked at what clothes I've put on. I do sometimes say, okay, is what I'm wearing going to look like I'm wearing something that's affiliated with a particular gang that people will associate me with? Is somebody going to look at me? Yes, absolutely. You do look at yourself and make certain choices in order to minimize danger. At least that's the way that I have grown up. Yes, that's the way I've grown up, is to minimize whatever danger that I feel like I put myself in. Even today, Susan. So for the audience, full disclosure, we're on a Zoom call with the video on. So I had to make choices in order to see what I look like. I had a different shirt on. That had something like, the "You Invented Swagger." Like, it was it's an aggressive shirt. So I was like, okay, let me tone this down and put this on so that you could, so that we can have a conversation. It isn't necessarily about you, Susan, but it is about the way that you can be perceived. And I think that goes to all facets and all people to a certain extent. But I think what the difference is that it can be amplified. It's amplified times 10 when you're talking about someone of a different skin color.
Yeah, I think perhaps women have that experience when they're getting dressed and think, is this too provocative? Am I going to get this or that? Is somebody going to, if something happens, God forbid, are they going to blame me for what I'm wearing?
Right.
Is a sweatshirt immediately mean that I'm carrying a weapon? I mean, that's an insane A to B. That's A to some other language as far as I'm concerned. But of course, that's something that is absolutely probably always in the back of the mind of somebody of color.
Yeah. I mean, I wish I could say it was it stayed in the back of the mind. But a lot of times my existence isn't necessarily around a strictly black community or a strictly brown community. I end up inhabiting spaces that have a lot of different people. So I think there's a lack of comfort there in some ways. There's a lack of comfort there that you have to be able to work around and work through. And it's honestly just something that I've had to live with because I've been fortunate enough, I think. I don't know if that's to say, that's the thing to say, but I've been fortunate enough to be around a lot of different types of people, even growing up.
I do think you're right on, that it must create a sense of, I don't know if PTSD is the right word, but an anxiety at the very least.
Yes, yeah, it definitely does. And for me personally, for many reasons. So, also full disclosure, I grew up in a Muslim household, very Orthodox Muslim household, and during that time, like especially pre 2001, it was relatively easier to live in I guess in sort of an anonymous way. Like, yes, people did wonder, oh, why does your mom have a towel on her head? Like, or why is your mom wearing this? Like, people ask those questions. People asked those questions, and you'd give an answer or whatnot. But for the most part, no one cared that much. It was just, oh, that's weird, whatever. Whereas obviously after 2001, things changed for a lot of people. And there were other conversations that had to be had.
And how old were you? Oh, I don't want to ask your age because you're an actor. Strike that from the record. I will delete that.
It was my sophomore year of high school. I was in Spanish class, and I remember when a student turned around to me and said, I hope your family didn't have anything to do with this. This was like literally while we're in class watching TV and people are losing their lives. Somebody turned around and said that to me.
How do you even respond to something like that? Here's the thing too.
Stunned. I mean, it was a shocking and horrible thing to see, that happened anyway, the immense loss of life. Like it was something that this country hadn't experienced during my lifetime. So it was a harrowing, horrible event for a lot of people.
But that's what we're famous for, right? Humans, I mean, lumping everyone into the action or deed of a couple people and
yes.
then unilaterally saying, blah. I mean, my God,
yes.
In the Inquisition times, the Catholics weren't real kind and friendly, but nobody gives nuns a hard time for wearing full habit. Where do you get to pick and choose?
Well, also they won. That's the other reason.
Yeah, right.
The Catholics won.
That's a good point.
And I say that as a person that was, I'm Muslim. I actually traced my ancestry. On my father's side, we are a descendant of Moors from Spain, and I'm assuming Muslims, as Muslims and Jews, obviously, that were there during that time, and then the obviously Christians as well. And the Inquisition happened. Jews obviously, were slaughtered. Muslims were slaughtered or forced to leave or forced to convert. Like, it was a horrible time. But like I said, the Catholics won and ended up being able to, write that history. Now, I will say this: after going to Spain last year, they are trying to make the country is trying to definitely make amends and talk about those times in history, which is a difference from what we do. But, from what we do in, as Americans, in a lot of times people say, just get over it, or it was a long time ago, who cares? So
yeah,
there's a difference in the way our culture handles something versus a different culture. But no, it's a different way of coming to terms with your history and your contribution to it. Our culture doesn't necessarily allow for that or want that. Again, in America, we are about incentives, it seems. What is the incentive to do it?
Mm-hmm. Are you still practicing Muslim, or did you grow up and say, Mom, Dad, you're weird, and then or whatever kids do?
No, I'm still practicing Muslim, but my views have definitely evolved and changed over the years.
And by the way, I should point out, when I say, oh, you're weird, I mean like kids who grow up in religious households.
I'm not offended.
Yeah, okay. I should clarify that.
I'm not offended.
But that happens a lot. That happens a lot when kids grow up in hyper-religious families, that as soon as they're out of the house, they're like, later taters, y'all are weird. I'm not a part of that. I'm like...
No, my evolution was different, especially after after what happened, especially after 9/11. My family was put under a lot of stress. My father had a strong leadership position at the Islamic Center in Jacksonville, and was basically at the forefront of every time that well, there's something that's happened in the world. Let's bring somebody on. My dad grew up Christian, knows his Bible very well, and was able to, either juxtapose, talk about, and be able to compare and contrast the religions in an educated way that people could understand. So there was also like a lot of hate and a lot of flack. And I remember there were, blacked out cars in front of my house. I remember having IDs confiscated when I went to the airport. This was early. This was before this was early on. And I think the most egregious thing, so I definitely have been detained several times, but I think the most egregious thing was I basically got interrogated in the open, after or before I even got onto a flight. And sometimes when it comes to, so my name is the most obvious tell, but a lot of times if you look at me and be like, okay, it's a black dude over there, you don't necessarily think, people think whatever. People think different things, but you see the name and you go, okay, I don't know. So it's hard to determine where a piece of prejudice or whatnot comes from or comes in.
What were you asked when you tried to get on the plane and they were doing that? What did they ask you?
This was just, am I in contact with drugs? Do I, what did I see when I was here? What were you doing? It was just in a very aggressive manner at the gate. So I had already gone through security. I had already gone through everything, and a plainclothes officer just approaches me and took my ID and took a picture of it, which was extremely strange. So I actually called the Miami Police Department, or the Fort Lauderdale Police Department, and inquired as to what their tactics were and if this was something that was normal and why they were using it. I also I talked to a civil rights attorney, or I called a civil rights attorney, but it took a while for them to get back. And by then, unfortunately, at some point I go, it's another day in America, and keep it moving. And maybe that's probably the wrong mentality to have, and not a mentality that will bring about change for the next person. But sometimes it's exhausting.
I was just going to say, I imagine it as being exhausting. It's how many fights do you have? How many fights are you expected to fight? There are certainly things worth fighting for. Absolutely. And I believe there are things worth dying for 100%. That's a no-brainer for me. But I do get the idea of and I see people talk about, it's okay to rest because it's a lot.
Right. I mean, and in some strange way, I feel that way about where the Black Lives Matter movement and everything is, today from me. I was out there pretty heavy during the time when I did have to go to work, when, right now, a lot of people aren't going to work. A lot of people aren't, so they have time to do this. I was out there doing this when I had to do that. It was, it is extremely important to me. But now it seems like the people that need to be out there now, especially, are the ones that are able to take up that mantle, and I can say, okay, all right, now where can I focus my energies now? Strangely enough, I have actually been trying to, probably the most important thing that I have done during all of this was talk to an actual police officer, and see where they had put their thoughts up, and it was pretty incendiary to me. And So I said, okay, let me try to talk to you. Let me engage with you. And we're actually able to have a decent dialogue, but I don't know how many minds I've changed, but at least we're able to hear each other. I don't know if that's progress. I don't know if that's good enough, but at least that's marinating in someone, in someone's mind, in someone who is employed by us to protect and serve a community.
Exactly. That's it that frustrates me. I say that as if hyperbole falls out of my mouth a lot these days. That is so frustrating. It's like you work for us. The government works for us. The police. It's not the other way around. It's not the other way around.
Well, and we have a constitutional right to a fair trial. Like we are supposed to have we're not. You're supposed to kill somebody on the street
until the Patriot Act. I said the patriarch. That's a Freudian slip.
I said, whoa. Okay.
The Patriot Act.
I said, I'm here for it.
When the Patriot Act came along, it's that thing about you convince people to be afraid, you can take away so much from them, so much of their civil liberty and their pursuit of justice and their pursuit of their fellow man. It's that thing of, are you voting for your best interest, or are you voting for the interests of your brothers and sisters? It's bigger than me.
Yes.
And by me, I mean the royal me. Yeah. Like everybody, all the me's out there.
All right.
Yeah.
No, it is bigger. I think it's funny you mentioned the Patriot Act, because I had a friend of mine that showed a picture of us down in Dallas. That's where I did my first year of undergraduate, was at a school in Dallas. And I remember it was the night before, it was the night of the election. That must have been, 2004? Yeah, Bush 2004 election. I remember George W. Bush was on campus at that time. And we were out there protesting then. And we were young, we were art students out there protesting. And for me, it was the loss of civil liberties, and which was something that was directly in front of me in my community as a Muslim. That was something that was directly affecting me. So it was extremely personal to be out there on the front lines. But now you fast forward to 2020, and it seems those things and those crimes and difficulties during the Bush administration have been forgotten by the people who are supposed to be on our side, that are supposed to be standing up for human rights and all of these things. We have a very short memory.
We do.
Or we have we've lionized the people that are our government officials, which we must remember that they work for us, that they're supposed to work for us, that they're supposed to be our employees. Yeah,
amen to that. And I find it very problematic. I get it. I get the idea that, when George W. Bush steps up and says, I'm not voting for Trump, and then that's a rallying cry to the left, and I get that, but I think, wow, did y'all forget the whole host of problematic things from that presidency? And it's like you say, we get very tunnel vision if it serves our purpose.
Yeah. We do.
How do you human? Yeah, it's so hard to human.
I wish I had answers. It seems like this episode is going to be just like an air of grievances and trying to work through things. It's a good thing, though. It's a good thing because, unfortunately, this is kind of where I end up living my life. This is where I kind of live my life, and it's. In some ways, it's discouraging. In some ways, it is discouraging, and it's something that it touches on mental health and being able to control, just control the things that you personally can control, like within your own life. And sometimes those things boil down to, okay, let me just recycle this can because this is the can, this aluminum can is the one that's in front of me, as opposed to let me go collect all the cans within a 26-mile radius so I can feel like I've done something. Sometimes you can do that.
One can be a lot. One moment, one breath, one day, one step, one thought. It's a lot. And I think you're right.
One kiss is all it takes.
Amen.
I like that song. That's a great song.
From what I remember, yes. How does your faith step in to, become the warm, fuzzy blanket that makes you feel nourished and protected? Or do you find, are there crises of faith in times like this?
I think for me personally, it's in all times. I'm not an evangelical. I wish, sometimes I wish my faith was as strong as some of the people that I see out here, that are Christian, or even my parents have their own, but I think what I have gathered from being around people of faith and growing up in one is that everybody struggles with it. It's not something that is just, it's not, I think everybody struggles with it, but not everybody will say that. Not everybody will be upfront about their struggles with it. And I think that's one of the biggest frustrations with people being a part of a organized religion, especially that's something that people talk about now. The lack of being real. There were a lot of instances when I was growing up that we weren't able to talk about the things that we needed to talk, that I felt like we needed to talk about, because these were the things that were actually going on, among us, but because they were deemed not part of the faith, there were things that we couldn't talk about. We couldn't have a discussion about. So that made it very, very difficult for me and other people. It created a sort of a resentment. Even within some of the communities that I grew up, racism is not contained just to white people.
Of course,
there was racism within the Muslim community. There was racism that I had to deal with and had to balance out. But I was grown up I was raised with a mentality that Muslims are supposed to be better than other people as far as the way that we treat each other, as the way that we behave toward one another. And growing up, as I got older, I was like, man, that does not necessarily seem to be the case. My friends that were atheists were real nice. So when you're a young person of faith like that, you're like, what? These things are extremely confusing to you. So I absolutely went through a strange time, mostly during my college life, my college experience. So I went to school in Texas my first year, and I left. I was having extreme difficulties with, honestly, being a black man on campus there, and an art student. And I had a real struggle my first year of college. Was trying to utilize the services there to go to therapy. I was used to being liked and being, feeling like I could do something here, or I can make a change. And you go to a place where people don't necessarily have to. People don't have to accept you or want to accept you. What are you going to do? What are you going to do about it when you're 18 years old and you're somewhere completely different? And people that are, some people that are close to you are extremely sick, or you have all these. There are a lot of other things that that I had to think about, and I think I wasn't ready mentally to be able to handle that. So I left and transferred to University of Miami, which was wonderful because it was such a vibrant, multicultural, multilingual campus. But at the same time, that also wasn't an accurate reflection of, I think, the real amount, the greater America at that time. Miami was its own cosmopolitan bubble, and it was awesome. I was probably one of the few people that actually only spoke English in my circle of 30 friends. It was like that. So it was an amazing experience. but at the same time, does not necessarily prepare you for what you're going to have to face and deal with once you leave that vibrant, amazing environment. But on the other half, the other side of it is, it shows you what possibilities can be, what possibilities that you can be. See, we want to be hopeful too.
Yes.
So it shows you the possibilities of what you can have in this world, and so there was where I kind of formulated my opinion and came to terms with my own with my faith and the way that I wanted to practice it and believe in myself. But there was a lot of anger involved. There was a lot of frustration within my dealings with other Muslims that I had to get out. And one of my outlet ended up being writing. And so I wrote all of this in the form of a play first, and then a screenplay called Pray to Ball. And that's where I got all of it out. And so I'm a better person after writing that. So the plot of that is there are two college basketball superstars that are going to play 1 year and go to the league. They grew up together, best friends. One is the main guy. His name is Hakeem. His mother passes away, and he's thrown for a loop. All the things that were important to him kind of don't matter anymore. And so he ends up turning to faith in order to be able to fill that void. The faith he chooses is Islam, and it starts off well for him, but it deteriorates the relationship with his best friend, and it ends up deteriorating for himself. His relationship with other Muslims and all of that becomes difficult. And so he ends up having to choose and decide who he wants to be for himself. And so that was my coming of age story that I wrote. I wasn't a superstar basketball player or anything, but it's ingrained in the culture. Like, that's ingrained in the culture down south is like college sports.
Oh yeah, for sure. I lived in Tennessee for 13 years. They're big on sports.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, you a volunteer? Were you a volunteer or you a Commodore?
I was neither. I just lived there. My best friend is very much into football and all that stuff, and she tried to get me on board. I enjoy watching a great game of sport, but I don't care so much who wins. To me, I just want to see really
the competitiveness.
Yeah, well, and just the beauty of the game. The beauty of the sport, which sounds, I guess, silly, but it doesn't sound silly, because that's why I chose it. That's why I chose that medium of that setting, because there is something beautiful and attractive about it, and it's dramatic. You never know what's going to happen. You never know what's going to happen in sports, and that's part of the fun. That is the fun part. Yeah, and these athletes become avatars for us. And, my favorite movies is I love sport movies where the underdog, comes up from behind and wins everything. I love that so much, because I'm an underdog, and I appreciate underdogs. And the thing I think is so hilarious when I go to sporting events is how everyone is so focused singularly, I can't say the word, singularly, there it is, on their team winning, and that team is them. They become, there's this weird symbiotic thing that happens over corn dip.
Right. You're absolutely right. And I think it's even deeper within college sports, because they're of that, like a lot of the student athletes are of that community. So there'll be kids you went to school with that go to your same university, or in some cases people's folks have gone there. So that was the case in my house. My dad had gone to University of Miami. I went there. My sister went there. My brother went there. Like, that is our family. That is what it's
identity.
Bedrock. It's a bedrock of us.
Yeah.
And so it's ingrained, but it's especially ingrained down south. Mm-hmm. It's different.
Yeah, and it's fascinating and fun, and again, I love the corn dip. It's real good. There's always good snacks at sporting things, and I'm very happy about that. So, but even I remember one year. So I grew up in Seattle, and the Seahawks made it to the Super Bowl, and I went to a party, and I again, even though I was from Seattle, I didn't really. I was just like, yay, fun game, friends, whatever. But I got caught up in it too. And it's fascinating to feel that in my body, like suddenly going, yes, my team, what? They're going to win.
So
what? Like, who cares?
You were like, run the ball with Marshawn. Was that the game?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so interesting. It's fascinating. And again, it speaks to how desperately humans need and want a tribe. We want to belong to something. I wish the tribe that we wish to belong to was bigger, but you see it in these little microcosms of human behavior.
Right, but is the small amount of tribalism difficult? Like, is that the thing isn't that also the thing that is tearing us apart in some ways? Yeah,
it's problematic. Yeah, I do think so. Because it by default, maybe unintentional consequence, but that it others.
But is that who we are?
Unfortunately.
I don't know why I'm asking you. You're supposed to ask me questions.
Yeah.
But I'm asking you.
I mean, I think.
Is that who we are?
I think it is. I think it's somewhere in our DNA. It meant survival. And it's very hard to get out of that DNA coding that is telling you if you hang out with these people, you will be safe. And even though now we are not in a world where a saber-toothed tiger or whatever it is, or an elephant's gonna come stomping out of or a rival tribe even, we don't have to.
Because you live in LA.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about those concerns so much, but
we got other concerns.
Yeah, well, but it's in our DNA to assess somebody and say, how are they? And again, I speak to this all the time. Instead of saying, how is this person the same as me? Our brain defaults to this. How is this person other?
Right.
And I don't have the answer. The whole reason I started this podcast was because I was giving up hope. I really was. I was giving up hope. I didn't know. I felt like nothing I was doing was enough. And so this is what I decided. It's like, this was how
It's amazing. That's amazing, Susan, because that's part of the reason why I wrote that show, was because I had to figure things out. I had to figure things out. I wasn't right within myself, and the art gave me the medium to do it. And I highly recommend whoever's out there listening. If you don't consider yourself an artist, there's something that you can do. There's something that you can put out into the world, be it a drawing, a painting, a podcast, a play, a film, clay, photography. There is something out there that you can do that can affect someone else in a positive way. You just have to figure out what that talent is and what it is that you want to say. Everybody has a story. And I think that was probably the most important piece of advice that I learned throughout my education, was that everybody has a story that they can tell, at least just one, that's different, that nobody else can tell as well. And this is what you're doing. That's what you're doing, Susan. And I absolutely commend you. And I encourage and highly recommend anybody else, everybody who's listening to do the same.
Thanks. I appreciate that. And I read your screenplay. I enjoyed it very much. And it was cool because, it gives me an insight to you. I get to sort of peer behind the curtain a little bit.
It's extremely personal. It's extremely personal to me, and that's why, I don't necessarily consider myself some huge talent. I was fortunate enough to have it produced here in Los Angeles, the play, with some phenomenal actors, and it got great reviews. It was great. It was a incredible thing. But I'm an actor first. But my talent isn't in putting on paper what everybody else was feeling. It was expressing my own thoughts and saying what it is that I needed to say from my voice and from my perspective. I'd like to say, like I said, I'd like to be able to write something about some 17th century British lady. That ain't where I'm coming from, though. I had to write what was me.
Yeah, well, I think truth is resounding.
Thank you.
Don't you think when people come to their truth, it's undeniable?
I hope so. I hope so, because there's a whole lot of people out here denying the truth. No, sorry.
What about acting?
That was my Florida was showing.
That was good. On the acting front, this is what you went to school for, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's what I went to school for, Miami and Penn State.
I watched your reel, too, in preparation. It was great. So fun.
I'm sorry. No, I'm just
kidding. It's great. Now, are you wanting to be a theater actor or a film actor, or it doesn't matter, all of the above?
Honestly, I feel like the industry doesn't necessarily, like, you don't necessarily, for me, I don't necessarily get to choose. It chooses you. And I've been very, very fortunate enough to be able to make a career in this, going on 10 years now. And it's been mixed. I've done amazing audiobook work on stage here and in Europe, to the most recent, had an episode of Empire this last season, Chicago Med. So, like, back to back. I've been very fortunate to be able to have a career that has gone from here to here to here to here, all different places. And so I'd say yes, I'd like to focus on getting this film made and on the TV and film medium, but there's something special about the theater. Being there live, being able to affect the other person immediately and see the person and feel the energy. There's nothing like great theater, but there's also nothing like bad theater. so it's a risk. It's a risk, baby. It's a risk.
I imagine it's terrifying. I think about, oh man, all those lines. And I love going to see plays. I love going to the theater so much. But as an adult now, I think, God, how did you learn all that stuff? It's so crazy. How terrifying. You can't mess up because
that's the base. That's just the base, though. The base is learning the lines. Like, I want you to evolve and say, well, you learned all those lines, but I've seen someone perform Hamlet. They learned more. So how did you do, conveying the story? How was your, how well did I believe what you were saying? That's more so that's your homework, Susan. Next time you go to the theater. If the theater ever opens this year, good grief.
Yeah, I think about that actually. When I forget, like, for example, Philip Seymour Hoffman. I would forget it was Philip Seymour Hoffman. Or when Jamie Foxx played Ray Charles. I remember having this moment in the theater going, I forgot it was Jamie Foxx. I thought I was watching Ray Charles. Or gosh, I just been watching the Catherine the Great funny show on Hulu. Mm-hmm. And I get so caught up. There's such phenomenal acting going on in that I believe them, and that lovely suspension moment. It's such a beautiful place to be when you're watching great performance. It happens when I watch ballet. It happens when I listen to opera, where you feel like you leave your body. You're not even the person in the seat anymore. You're on some other realm or something.
That happens when I listen to Tupac.
Ah, very good. I love it.
She said, ah.
Well, a poet, and certainly a man ahead of his time, and a great thinker.
Indeed.
And he's hiding somewhere. He's not really dead.
Oh, goodness.
No, I'm teasing.
He's in Cuba.
His spirit lives on.
No, you know what's funny? Like, not funny, haha funny, but that was definitely one of the first, like, conspiracy theories when I was, like, a kid that, like, you heard about. Was like, oh, Tupac's not really dead. He's in Cuba. That was, like, the thing that people were, like, that people would say.
Mm-hmm.
And now we attach conspiracy theories to everything now. Everything.
I have a theory as to why.
I want to hear it.
I think the world is very trying and scary for some people, and there's a lot of unknown, and because we're a species that feels much happier when we have control over our environment, like an unseen virus that just attacked, the population of the world. If I say that a lab person created it in order to destroy the earth, that's much easier to swallow because it's a known, it's a control. Okay, now I've given it a face and I can stick my finger in the dike because the unknown is so terrifying. If the unknown wasn't terrifying, religion never would have taken off.
Oh, you mean the known is so terrifying? You mean the known thing is terrifying? Like the
known of the unknown of the known. The unknown of the known. I know a virus exists, but I don't know why.
Got you.
Yeah.
Oh, well, see, yeah. Oh, okay. Got you. It's a rough time.
Conspiracy theories are getting very, very complex. Also, which is really interesting.
They are.
They're getting super complex.
Did you watch some of them? Did you watch Pandemic?
I watched part of it because people kept talking about it, and for me, I'm like, I gotta see what this is about, and I'm just like, but I was raised by a scientist.
Right. Oh.
We were rooted in, growing up, a knowledge of things that were tangible, and
right.
And knowing that, for example, science is constantly trying to prove something is wrong, and knowing that with that,
right, isn't it constantly changing? Right, it's constantly changing.
Yeah, and
I'm asking. Like,
I think it is.
That's true, right?
Well, like, as a scientist, the scientist hears a theory, and then 40 scientists are like, I'm going to prove that wrong. Like, they're, do you know what I mean? They're constantly in a state of doubtfulness, not in a state of support. And so,
right, but I feel like that is weaponized now. That is the thing that people are weaponizing. Well, he didn't know. See, they were wrong about. They said it was going to be 2 million people that died. See, it's a fake virus.
People don't understand data.
That's where people go.
People don't understand data collection. What the response to the initial panic was justified in that they didn't know anything. Now here we are, 4 or 5 months out, they have data from all over the world. They can piece together a model and they can recalibrate. But you and I both know that we live very firmly in a society that has a thought.
Binary.
And then it's an unfortunate thing because the world is a million shades of gray. There's the fact, I don't know that we ever get to a solid black or solid white state, metaphorically speaking.
Except on racial issues. I'm sorry.
No. No. You have an audition tonight.
It's more a reading.
A reading.
So
okay.
like I've been getting together with like, this is the awesome thing about artists is that they'll figure out how to put something on. We'll figure out how to put something on in a basement or over Zoom or on a street corner. We will figure it out.
Yeah.
In order to get our stuff done. And so there's a group that meets. They produce screenplays, 10-minute shorts for about $300. And so there are a lot of artists a lot of writers that are in this group. We submit and try to get our work picked, and we read, we act in each other's stuff. So it's like a whole thing. It's just a whole nice little collective of writers. And I encourage people, I encourage people to continue to create their own. Don't wait for someone to give it to you.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
Wait for someone to give it to you.
For sure. That's true across the board. Be your own cheerleader. Be your own champion. Absolutely. How can people find you, Amir? I've taken so much of your time, and I could talk to you forever, I feel like. So
I could talk to you forever. It's all good. Let's talk. No. You can find me at www.amir-abdullah, A, B as in boy, D as in dog, ULLAH.com.
Perfect. And you're on Twitter and stuff too. But
you can find me on Twitter.
You have the fancy Twitter where you have to allow people to be your Twitter friend. Because I went to add you last night. Yeah. I was like, ooh, fancy.
At Sir Amir Abdullah.
I'll put links on Hey Human. Question before we go. Oh shoot, I was gonna ask you. Oh, I remember now. We met in a writers group, and you got so lit up talking about Shakespeare. And is that your favorite playwright? Do you have a favorite playwright or a couple favorites?
Yeah, I have a few favorites. August Wilson obviously is in the pantheon of black writers. Lorraine Hansberry is probably my favorite as far as where the politics align with just perfection in structure. Like A Raisin in the Sun is probably the perfect play. Like I make an argument that is the perfect play of the main character having a complete arc, redemption. You feel for every single person in that show, from the white guy that has to come deliver the news to Bobo who has to come deliver the news. You feel bad for every single person in that show. You have empathy for. I think that is such a masterful piece of work. It's funny, it's devastating, and it perfectly captures a time in the 1960s Chicago. I mean, A Raisin in the Sun. That is the perfect play, in my opinion. Shakespeare, again, as I said, a lot of times in the art, you don't necessarily get to pick what you do. It picks you. I've been very fortunate to be able to play a few seminal characters in Shakespeare. My favorite being the Scottish King, Macbeth. And Shakespeare, just the poetry, the themes, the invention of words, like the language in general. Yeah, it's exciting. It's fun when done very well. I'm not gonna lie to you and say that there's not a bunch of boring Shakespeare out there, because there can be. It's difficult to do. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do and do well. It requires a lot of. And every actor will tell you that they have to look up those words too. People don't just study Shakespeare and read a play and just know what everything means. We have lexicons. I go to SparkNotes still to this day to look up what things are being said. So please don't. We need to destigmatize. We need to destigmatize that, like our knowledge of what's in these books. So, but Shakespeare is incredible. I've been watching the National Theatre Live versions of a lot of different plays that come out of England. The most recent one, or this past week, has been Coriolanus, and I think they premiered a different one today. See, you got it. But I'm excited to watch Coriolanus with Tom Hiddleston. Tom
Hiddleston, yeah. I'm excited to watch it.
You watched it already?
I know. I'm going to watch it. I'm very excited.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm very excited. I grew up in a house that worshipped Shakespeare, so I was very lucky.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Did you have a favorite play or a role?
Midsummer's Night's Dream. When I was a kid, I loved Taming of the Shrew. You
like the comedies. You gravitate toward the comedies.
Yeah, I do.
Interesting.
What else do I like? I mean, I'll
tell you. Go ahead. Why? I'm interested. Why?
As You Like It. I like that one as well. Why do I like? Because they're so sassy, and the women are strong. You know what? Even when they're being played as if they're not, they're strong. They have a mind of their own, and they're fiery.
But I would argue that in some of they're especially sassy in Midsummer
and Taming of the Shrew.
Yeah, but like the whole nature of the play, though, is
I know. Of course. But
beyond that, that's why I go. My argument would be for the obviously, this is great that we disagree. Finally, no. My argument would be for the tragedies.
Well, Hamlet, I've seen about 3 billion times. All these different actors playing Hamlet, and I love Hamlet as well. Which a tragic female figure, obviously Ophelia.
One of the hardest roles I can imagine to play. That is a very hard role, and I feel like it's very underwritten. But that's just my 2 cents.
The madness of Ophelia. I think Polonius is hilarious. He's such a jerk, but he's so funny. I mean, I don't know. Growing up as a little girl and we would go to the Shakespearean Festival in Oregon in the summer, and
okay,
yeah,
went to Ashland.
Yeah, and get to do all that stuff. And I mean, when you're a little kid and you're watching, it's so magical. It's so magical. Do you remember the moment where you said, "Oh, this is what I'm going to be"?
Wow, no, I fought it. I fought it a lot because it wasn't something that was encouraged in my house for various reasons. But my mom took us to see shows. She took us to see shows. She took us to see plays, especially ones that were Black themed. But I remember going to Metropolitan Park, which was this park in Jacksonville, and seeing they had they did Shakespeare in the park as well. I remember The Tempest. That one was most etched in my mind. And later, probably about 3 years later, the lady who played Prospera was my drama teacher in high school, which I had no idea that was going to happen, nor did I know. That was pretty special to that was pretty special. But as far as a moment, no, because literally, Susan, everything, I've been picked. The art picked me. Because I had very little direction around that, around my freshman year of high school. I wasn't particularly great in school at that time. I had little direction. My grandmother had passed, who was my closest person to me. And so I was definitely lost, and I had 2 drama teachers that came in and really helped shape me and showed me what was possible outside of Jacksonville, Florida. I was fortunate.
You say your parents weren't, or no, you didn't say that. You said your household didn't necessarily support it. Why?
No, they didn't. And my those drama teachers wrote letters to my folks. I mean, for various reasons. A lot of it is self-preservation, especially for us, growing up. As a Black person, I understand why my parents were like that, because they wanted the best. They wanted the best for you. They want you to not have to struggle and not have to grind, which is the life of the artist. And there's an opportunity to do better, then please do better, by all means. I understand it, and it took years to get to that level of understanding, but I understand it. But yeah, my teachers wrote letters to my folks to encourage them to allow me to do it, and to their credit, they supported. They supported it. They supported me studying and continuing on, and it has been a constant, a lifelong continuation of reaffirming my commitment to the arts for them. But for me, I love it. This is what I do. It's what I do. It's what I do.
Is your family super tight?
Yeah, we are very tight. We're all very close.
Where are you in the birth order? Are you eldest?
Well, I'm a second youngest out of 5.
Oh my gosh, 5. Yeah. That's fun.
A lot of us.
my best friend is the eldest. of 5. And she's funny because I get to go there for Christmas or Thanksgiving or something, and I love it. It's total freaking chaos, and I love it. And she's like, how do you love this? Because she grew up in it. So for her, it's just annoying, but for me, it's the cacophony is the best part.
Did you have brothers and sisters?
I'm the accidental oopsie baby, so I came along way after my brothers, and basically was an only child for the most part. Yeah, so I love all the action and the chaos. I think it's fun.
I think parents are superheroes. I'm not a parent, and when I see what they do and what they go through every single day, especially throughout the pandemic, I am wowed. I'm wowed. It seems exhausting. It seems extremely exhausting, and just a complete selfless commitment. Shout out to all the parents out there. Lord knows I couldn't do it yet.
Do you want children?
I think they'd be nice. But they'd be nice.
But
as far as it being integral to my continued existence on planet Earth.
Right. Well, yeah, that's the immortality thing, right? Do you feel like the need that you have to... I do often wonder that about artist types too, or anyone that is going after something that they can make a name that lasts beyond this mortal coil. Does that shift their experience?
I see you.
Do you know what I mean? Does it shift your experience of whether or not to have children to carry on your name, quote unquote? It's an interesting thought experiment, I think.
How do I think about it? Yes. I mean, yes and no. Yes and no. You can have a lasting impact on this world without it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have a lasting impact on this world without it. And
yeah, for sure.
That's how I feel about it today.
Yeah.
Ask me tomorrow, I might have a different answer.
Yeah, I totally get that. Just one more thing for people listening, if you were to recommend good reading to understand the Muslim culture.
Probably one of the most formative books for me in understanding the possibilities and evolution of Islam from its history to its various current forms now is No God But God by Reza Aslan. That book for me was, number one, easy to understand for anyone. I think it would be a book that's easy to understand by anyone. It's someone that a lot of people are familiar with, but it's not his most famous book was Zealot, like the Chronicle of Jesus Christ. But No God But God is one of his earlier books, and I think it is wonderful in laying out a comprehensive version of the history and various movements within Islam. So that would be the book that I would recommend to most people. Also, a reading of the Quran, juxtaposed with the Bible and seeing what compares, contrasts, like that's important. That's important, obviously, as well. I think that's important as well. And understanding context.
When I talk about religion with folks and they have their preconceived notion of what it means to be a practicing Muslim, I often say, well, have you read the Quran? And they say, no. And I say, well, maybe start there. Start there before you start your argument.
I would say, you could say, like I said, I hesitated to start there because I don't know that necessarily, like I said, people are coming in with their own preconceived notions right now anyway.
Oh, so for sure.
I go, okay, let's go to an analysis of Islam's place in the context of the world history before we jump into let's go to historical text.
Yeah, and I love his writing anyway. That wasn't to say that that was perfect. I'm just saying in my experience that I get frustrated when people are ready to talk shit about something that they literally have nothing about.
Well, I'm not the arbiter. I'm not the arbiter of all Muslims nor black people. And
wait, I was told you were the guy.
That's the whole reason you brought me on, huh?
I gotta start all over.
I know. I'll get him for you. We have him on speed dial.
Yeah, there's a red phone.
Him? No.
Amazing. Amir, thank you. This has been so much fun.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on. I
really appreciate the time that you spent and your willingness to be on the show too. Because again, it's, I'm just a stranger going, hey, will you do this? And,
No, we're family.
Yay.
Human family.
Amen. Yes, I agree. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.
You too.
Yeah.
Thanks,
bye, everybody. Rate and review Hey Human on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. Stay safe. Be well. Bye.